Hey guys, sorry for this short update. I apologize. Things have gotten really crazy around here, actually. I'm not sure how often I'll be able to update going forward. I really appreciate all the support that you guys have been giving me, though, and while I only have a couple more stories to share with you, I'll be interested to see what you guys all think. Anyway, let's pick up where we left off at. This one is from a firefighter who was helping us at the training op. Told me about a call that he'd been on, supposedly to help rescue a kid from an absolutely massive tree. He said he didn't give him the details, just that they needed him to come out and help because they lacked the proper equipment. He'd been called out specifically because this thing was so huge that the other S.A.Rs didn't feel safe trying to climb it. He'd been a tree trimmer before joining the VFD, so it was easy enough for him to grab his old equipment and come out to help. It was let out about 2 miles, and the team stopped at one of the biggest trees in the area and pointed up. He laughed and asked the op captain how the kid had gotten up there. Made some joke about the old cat in the tree thing, but the captain just shook his head and told him to get up there and get the kid down. He said he knew something was up, but he didn't push it. He said that as he climbed this tree, he started wondering if they were playing a prank on him. There was just no way this kid should have been able to climb this fucking thing. I mean, it was massive at the base, but about halfway up it started tapering, and I almost had to turn back a few times because I really didn't think it was gonna hold me. But he said he kept going, and when he was just about at the top, he saw a flash of blue in the branches. I saw the kid's shirt sorta caught in the branch, and I called out to him, told him to come near me if he could, but he didn't say anything. I kept moving, calling the kid's name, telling him not to be scared, that I was there to help him. But by the time that I got to him, I knew he wasn't going to answer me. I found him, or what was left of him, cradled in the fork of a branch. And the fact that he was up there was just sheer luck. If he had fallen any other way, he would have come crashing down. It wouldn't have mattered though, because this kid was dead long before he ended up in that tree. I don't know who put him up there, or how, or why, but it was fucking sick. Kid's intestines had popped out his mouth, and they were hanging in the branches. It was like some sick fucking Christmas tree. The way that they were draped all over everything. Got a better look and saw that they even popped out his ass. His guts were hanging out the bottom of his pants. His eyes were gone. I assumed shoved out from whatever force it caused him to fucking pop like a stress ball. You ever see a body that's been floating out in the water for a long time? How their tongues just kind of swell up and stick out? He was like that. I remember because there were flies crawling all over it. I think I must have gone into shock because... Man, I just pushed that kid down with the stick that I broke off a branch. Just kind of poked him until he fell. I don't know why I did that. I almost lost my job because of that. But, man, the thought of hauling that kid down over my shoulder the whole way, gathering his guts up and coiling them around me like a rope so they wouldn't get snagged, I just couldn't do it. I've seen a lot of dead kids, more than I'd ever care to admit. I've seen one kid who hid in a full bathtub during a house fire. It boiled him alive, turned him into literal soup. But this, I don't know what did this, but the thought of touching that kid's body made me feel like I was gonna lose my mind, man. I heard him hit the ground and I figured everyone would freak out. But they knew that he was dead when they sent me up there. They didn't say anything. They didn't shout or freak out or anything. I got to the bottom, and I started to get up in the captain's face, asking him who he thought he was sending me up there, when he knew damn well that kid was dead. But he just told me that it was none of my concern, and thanked me for getting the evidence down. I remember he said that. I remember it specifically because, it was just so weird to hear it phrased that way. The evidence. Like he wasn't even a person. Like he'd never been a little kid who got lost and had something fucking unspeakable happen to him. The captain had a crew lead me back out the woods, but he and 2 others stayed behind. I thought that was weird. Why didn't they come help me get the kid out? I tried asking the other guys leading me out, but they just told me they couldn't discuss an open case. I asked him what he thought had happened to the kid, and he got really pensive and thought about it for a second. I would have said a crushing injury based on how his guts came out like that, but those injuries, you see massive contusions under the skin, obvious trauma. This wasn't like that though. It was almost like the kid got caught in a big vacuum and had his guts sucked out. But even then, there was no trauma. None at all. And it bothers me, man. It bothers the hell out of me. One of the vets at the training ops listens to a lot of YouTube. He found my channel, recognized my stories, and was pretty excited. He knows me pretty well, and we've swapped stories before. He asked me if he could share something that he's noticed about the stairs and some thoughts that he had. I'm really glad that you decided to share these. I think it's important that people be aware of what's out there, especially since the Forest Service is doing such a good job at covering it all up. I asked him what he meant. What do you mean? What do I mean? I mean, the complete lack of any kind of media attention. No coverage of the missing kids or bodies found miles from where they got lost in the first place. David Pilates hit this right on the head. The FS is doing everything they can to keep people coming here, even if it isn't safe. I mean, to be fair, it's not like these things are happening every day, but the numbers are adding up, and it's worth looking into. Especially the stairs. I was really surprised that you didn't mention the flipped ones. I didn't know what he was talking about. I couldn't remember him ever talking about something like this, and he seemed somewhat incredulous. Dude! I can't believe you've been on this long without seeing him. I mean, no one told you about them? I shrugged, and he asked him to elaborate. Well, okay, there's the normal stairs, right? I mean, those ones that pop up when you're just like a ways out. I know you know about them, but sometimes I've run across ones that are completely flipped upside down. I guess it would be like if you had a dollhouse, and the stairs were a separate piece. Now take that, flip it upside down, and stick it in the dirt so the top half is in the dirt. And put it out in the woods. And they're like that. I don't see them as often, but they're odd, to say the least. It makes me think of footage right after a tornado, when the houses are all blown apart and random things are left stranded, like chimneys and garden walls. Those ones freak me out more than the normal ones, because I really can't write those off as easily. I don't scare very easy, like most of us who work here, but that idea stuck with me, and it bothers me. I'm going to try and find out more about them. He also mentions how many people were bothered by the guy with no face. He was really excited and told me that he'd seen something similar. I was out in a training exercise a few years ago, yeah? I was camped out in my tent, and I heard someone walking around outside of the camp. We're told not to wander off far, which, I mean, you know. So I wondered if maybe it was a rookie who had gotten up to pee and couldn't find his way back. Remember that guy in our group a few years back who almost fell off the damn mountain? Well, I'm paranoid about that happening again, so I got up to see what was going on, and I went to the edge of the camp. I called to whoever it was and told them the camp was back this way, but they just kept going back out into the woods, and so I went after them. I knew it was stupid, but I was half asleep, and I just really didn't want to deal with some idiot getting hurt. I followed this thing on a dead-end straight course for about a mile, and then it stopped by the edge of a river. I could see the outline of it because the water was reflecting the moon, and it looked just like an ordinary guy. He had a pack on, and it looked like he was facing me. You know me, and I asked if he was okay, if he needed help. And you know what that bastard does? He cocks his head to the side like he didn't understand me. I always have my pocket knife on me, and it's got a little thumb light attached to it. So I turned that on and lit up his chest, so I wouldn't blind him. He was breathing slow and deep, so I wondered if he was sleepwalking. I went closer and asked him again if he was okay. I moved the light up and something just didn't seem right, so I stopped. He kept breathing real slow, deep breaths, and I sort of figured out gradually that that's what was bothering me. It was like he was pretending to breathe, but not actually doing it, you know? His breaths were too deep and too even. but all his movements were exaggerated, like his shoulders going up and his chest moving. I told him to identify himself, and he made this muffled noise. I moved the light up, and I shit you not, this guy had no face, just smooth skin. I freaked out and I sort of fumbled my light, but I saw him move towards me, but he didn't actually move. I don't know how to explain it, but 1 second he was at the edge of the river, and the next he was 5 feet in front of me. I never looked away or blinked. It was like he moved so fast my brain just couldn't keep up. I tripped and fell on my ass. I could see the line open up on his throat. It stretched out to his ears, and his head tilted back, and he smiled at me with his throat. There wasn't any blood, just this gaping dark hole, and I swear he smiled at me with this gash in his throat. I got up and ran as fast as I could back to the camp. I couldn't hear him following me, but I felt like he was always right behind me. Even though, when I looked back, I couldn't see him. I calmed down when I got back to the camp. The fire was still going, and I guess that pack mentality of being with other people made me sort of stop and breathe a little. I waited by the fire to see if he'd follow me there, but I didn't hear anything else for a few hours. So I went back to bed. I know it sounds weird, but the whole thing was just so surreal that it was almost like I immediately wrote it off as my imagination. We were telling ghost stories one night, just before bed, just to scare each other and poke fun at whoever actually got creeped out. Most of the time, it's the rookies, but one woman told a story that actually managed to get under my skin a little bit. And I know the same was true for others. She said it was true, but then again, every ghost story told around a campfire is true. Somehow, though, I don't think she was making it up. It had that ring of truth that only really traumatizing events have. She said that when she was a kid, she and her friends used to go out into the woods behind her house a lot. They lived in northern Maine, where there's a lot of dense, unpopulated national forest. She said that the woods up there aren't like the ones here. They're so thick in places that trees block out the sun almost completely. She and her friends grew up there, so they weren't scared of being out there alone, but they did always maintain a sense of caution in certain areas. She said that it was never really talked about, but they always knew not to go more than a mile or two beyond their homes. The adults never said why, but it was an unspoken rule that no one ventured out that far. She and her friend made up stories about bears as big as houses that lived out there, that they used to scare each other by hiding and making growling noises while the other one searched for them. She said that one summer, there was a series of awful storms that blew down a lot of trees and set one part of the forest a few miles behind her house on fire. Fire crews got it under control, but she said that some of them came back not quite the same. It was like they'd been to war. You could tell who had really gotten scared because they all had the same looks on their faces. I think it's called shell shock. My friend and I said that they all looked like walking dead people. They didn't smile or say anything if you went up to them, and most of them left town as soon as everything was over. I asked my parents about it, but they didn't know what I was talking about. Once everyone was out of the woods and they said that they were safe again, my friend and I decided to try and hike out to where the fire had been. We didn't tell our parents where we were going, and it was pretty exciting just to think that we were disobeying them like that. We hiked out about 2 miles or so, and we started to see burnt trees and stuff. I remember my friend got really upset because we found the skeleton of a deer all curled up under a tree, and I practically had to drag her away. She wanted to bury it, but I didn't want her touching it because its antlers were weird. I can't remember why, I just remember thinking that there was something wrong with them, and I didn't want either of us going near it. The farther we went, the more burnt everything got. Eventually, there was no standing trees, and it was like we were being on another planet entirely. Almost nothing was green, just brown and black everywhere. We were standing there looking at it all, and then we both heard someone shouting in the distance. I panicked because I thought it was my dad, and that he was going to tell me that I was grounded. My friend broke off and went to go hide behind a big rock because she said that she didn't want to be caught out here. Her parents had forbade her to come out to the woods at all, and she lied and told them that we were going to a movie. I followed her, and we kept listening. I could hear this voice getting closer, and I realized that they were calling for help. I thought maybe it was some hiker who had gotten lost and needed directions back to town. That used to happen all the time, so I was used to helping people out. I heard him following my voice, so I kept calling out until I saw him running in the distance. He had gotten closer and I could see that his face was all red. I told my friend to give me her pack because she had the first aid kit. She made this noise like she was grossed out and asked me if I had seen his face, but I just told her to shut up, and I jogged up to meet him. I stopped about halfway when he stopped in front of me. I could see that his nose and lips and part of his forehead were all gone. It was like they had been sliced clean off. He was bleeding bad, and I saw that the knees of his pants were red too. I took a step back, but I was too scared to move much, and he grabbed my shoulders. It felt like I had gotten a shock, and he jerked back. He started babbling, and I couldn't tell what he was saying except that he was asking how long he'd been gone. He asked me where his unit was, but I just shook my head. He looked me over and saw my Walkman and screamed. He just kept babbling and touching his face, and I realized that he wasn't wearing the right clothing. He had some kind of weird gray cloth jacket and almost formal pants on, and the jacket had these weird buttons and red borders on it. I kept shaking my head and told him that I couldn't understand what he was saying. I went to open the first aid kit, but he just screamed again and said the only thing that I could really understand. "Don't touch me! You'll just make me go back there!" After that, he ran off, and I really could hear him screaming the whole time. When I couldn't hear him anymore, I turned around and my friend was crying. I just turned around and started walking back towards town. She asked me over and over what had happened, who that was, but I didn't say anything. When we got home, I told her that I didn't want to play in the woods with her anymore. We're still friends, but we don't talk about that guy. Not ever. Well, I guess that was the last story for tonight then, huh? Damn. Guess that means I gotta start looking into the whole reverse staircase thing. I mean, seriously, the normal staircases are kept under wraps, so I can't imagine that will be easy to find. I mean, not at all unless I actually run into them myself. I'll update as soon as I'm able, guys. I appreciate the continued support so much. Seriously. I'm really starting to get my name out there with these stories, and it means a lot. Well, hopefully on my way out I don't end up running into any burnt time-traveling men or guys with no faces, right? I'll see you guys next time.